What's going on? So I just read one of the most ridiculous things I've read in quite a while. It's an article on Salon called Lessons of Beto O'Rourke and Joker. Mental illness is not the cause of gun violence. And the first paragraph kind of gives a little bit of an overview as to what this nonsense is about. It says, the hit movie Joker, released in theaters last week, unintentionally offers an object lesson in why society should stop vilifying mental illness and why we need far more vigorous gun control. It goes on to say both points become evident in a single scene that perfectly captures both the movie's ambiguous views on mental illness and those of American society overall. It says that the character in the movie is jumped, basically, and is offered a gun, I assume, for self-defense. It even says Fleck, Arthur Fleck is Joker's name in the movie, Fleck is initially horrified by the idea. He is mentally ill and isn't legally permitted to own a firearm. Eventually, he agrees to accept the weapon, an act that single-handedly turns him toward the path of violence and thereby sets the plot in motion. That last sentence, in and of itself, makes me scratch my head big time about this whole article, because that's kind of the premise of the whole article at this point. He's saying that him taking the weapon made the Joker evil. I haven't seen the movie, but I'm thinking that might not be the case. The movie aside, there's kind of two parts of this as far as real life goes. There's 2 points I think they're trying to make. The first being, essentially it's mental illness shouldn't be vilified, which I can agree with that. The second part being gun control is the answer. And there's a little subtle undertone of anti-Trumpism in here as well. They managed to shoehorn in here. In other words, a viewer could easily watch Joker and walk away with the same conclusion proclaimed by President Trump in August after mass shootings in Texas and Ohio left 31 people dead. Mental illness and hatred pull the trigger, not the gun. Which is something I completely agree with. But God forbid anyone agree with Trump, right? Goes on to try to portray the picture that mental illness doesn't cause violence. And sure, I could agree with that. But then he goes on to cite a study that says most patients with stable mental illness do not present an increased risk of violence. A stable mental illness. There is a huge difference between somebody that's mentally ill and somebody that's been treated, diagnosed, and is under the care of a physician for a mental illness. This article tries to conflate both of those together into the same thing, and no, that is not right. Like I said, the whole premise of this article is completely false. The whole point of this article is access to guns, not mental health, is the cause of this epidemic. It's correct in that mental health, like as in diagnosable conditions, may not really be the biggest contributor to mass shootings and violence and everything else. I'd actually put pretty good money on the fact that it's not. Being as, gang violence accounts for a huge chunk of deaths by handgun, deaths by firearm, violence in general, and I'm pretty sure none of them are sick. But also, access to guns doesn't have anything to do with it. Unless, of course, they're thinking, let's just push that big red magic button and make all the guns go away. And I think we all know that Pandora's box is open and ain't nothing you can do about it now. This is the world we live in. There are guns. There are a lot of guns. That's okay. We need to address the societal issues, the culture, not necessarily mental illness, but the culture of people. We need to bring back the value of life. Not worry about the tool. It doesn't matter. The article says, the problem, of course, is that we live in a culture where it is fashionable to stigmatize the mentally ill and fetishize guns. Who in the hell is stigmatizing the mentally ill? I mean, really. And who the hell is fetishizing guns? Shit, most people are terrified of them. All they do is watch CNN and think guns are bombs and they're going to blow up in their hand at the first chance they get. The vast majority of people in the US don't fetishize guns, and the vast majority of people in the US don't stigmatize mental illness. What is this even talking about? He mentions the buybacks in other countries, which I've heard haven't really been going as swimmingly as you may like to believe, have worked well in other countries, and he even posts a link to how he explores the true history of the Second Amendment. Perhaps that's a video for another day, because, yeah, I doubt that. He says, I do not come to these observations as a neutral party. Obviously, it's blatantly clear that you have an agenda to push with this freaking article. But he says, as a person on the autism spectrum, more on that here. I guess he wrote another article about that. Writing little thing, isn't he? I have experienced considerable rejection and abuse both as a child and adult. Like Arthur Fleck, I can't help but wonder whether the depression, anxiety, and other mental health conditions I have experienced are organic to my being, or the result of widespread mistreatment I endured because I was physiologically different. Like Arthur, I understand having to pretend that I'm not mentally ill so that the normies, many of whom are directly responsible for my past, present, and future plight, won't feel uncomfortable. See a lot of blame going on here, dude. Whole lot. How guns tie into this, I'm not real sure. Maybe you were shot at some point? I don't think so. Pretty sure you would have mentioned that by now. And if you're going through some shit, sorry, but yeah, that doesn't give you a right to infringe on everyone else's rights. That's not how it works. He says, I have never been violent. I have no tendencies toward violence. Okay, good. Most people don't. Go buy a gun if you want. What's your point? There's your point. If you want to stop gun violence, support policies like those advocated by Beto O'Rourke, who I call Francis, by the way, because that's his name, which would save countless lives. I kind of doubt that, because not only would the vast majority of Americans not turn in their weapons because it's their right not to, they shouldn't have to. And that's what a lot of people don't realize when it comes to these types of things. Whenever a bill or an idea or something comes along, people tend to try to just focus on the outcome. They want to see one little piece of it, and that's it. They think, oh, we'll just take all the guns, gun violence will go away. But they completely ignore the fact that, hey, yeah, firearm ownership is a right. We have a right to bear arms. They completely forget to even mention how everybody's rights are going to get completely thrown in the trash. And that's pretty terrible, because if you think about it, like, think if someone was out there trying to get rid of the First Amendment or the Fifth Amendment, all hell would break loose. Rightfully so. But instead, because it's the Second Amendment and guns are scary and bad, we get garbage like this out there. Talk of mental illness has no place in our national conversation about gun violence. Well, then why did you write this? Why? What is the point of this at all? Why is this even here? That was the whole point of this entire article, was talking about how you support Francis's gun buyback confiscation nonsense in the name of safety and security as a political point. And then at the end you say, talk of mental illness has no place in our national conversation about gun violence. What? Did somebody else write this last paragraph? What are you talking about, dude? So again, I say, support Gun Owners of America, the Firearms Policy Coalition, and the Second Amendment Foundation. These are groups that fight for our rights. They're not the NRA, big bad NRA. They actually fight for our rights, because that's what they are, our rights. And anytime you see a ridiculous article like this, shoot them a comment or an email or something if you get a minute and be like, hey, what are you talking about? I'm going to shoot him an email like, what are you talking about? You can't confiscate people's right to bear arms. You can't confiscate people's lawfully owned legal property. That's not okay. And he may reply, he may not, I don't know. But if he does, I'll make a follow-up video, and be sure to like, share, subscribe, and all that noise to see if he does. Later.